Hi there, and welcome to the Hub of Junior Golf Podcast. I'm Ryan Burr, joined as always by the founder of the Junior Golf Hub, Roger Nick. And Roger, certainly an exciting time in 2024 for not only junior golf but professional golf, as we've seen the junior golf. This is when you know you're getting old, when junior golfers start winning on the PGA Tour. It's a good problem to have, but it also means we're getting a little bit older. But certainly Nick Dunlap, who's had an unbelievable junior career, certainly getting his start with the Junior Golf Hub Nota Begay, the third Junior Golf National Championship Tour, and then winning the U.S. Junior and the U.S. Am. Tiger Woods, the only other player to win both of them, and then obviously to break through and win as an amateur. Pretty exciting stuff, but it also speaks to the level of how good junior golf is, that someone that you're talking about in the last 2 years has done a lot in junior golf is now winning on the PGA Tour.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I was thinking about that. I was watching that. And by the way, Ryan, you don't look a day older than 55, so uh, you're not that old yet. So you're catching up. But anyway, so no, watching Nick win that tournament this past weekend was amazing to kind of see. Just 3 years ago, right? I mean, it wasn't long. And what he's done and accomplished, it just goes to the preparedness of these junior golfers these days, right? Maybe the schedules they're playing, maybe it's the workouts they're doing, maybe it's the golf skills they are acquiring so much earlier, or the competition requires it, right? Whatever it is, it's been exciting to see these young players come out and able to do what they've done. Obviously, we talked about that with Rose Zhang, who came right out of college and won. I mean, Nick's a freshman in college, so I mean, he's done it even earlier. So to see this happen, what is it? Phil Mickelson was the last 91. So sounds like, and it seems like the game's in a great state right now of developing some good players.
Yeah, I agree. You look at PGA Tour U, Aberg came right out off of PGA Tour U and won. Before PGA Tour U, you had the year where Matt Wolff, Colin Morikawa, and Hovland all won coming directly out of college. Here's an interesting question for you, Roger. Certainly, there aren't a lot of opportunity, very, very little opportunity for a college player to even get the opportunity to play on the PGA Tour where they would have an opportunity to win. I'm curious what your thought on this is. If every week on the PGA Tour there were 5 to 10 spots for amateurs, college players, would this happen a lot more than every 30 years?
Oh, I think without a doubt. I think given that kind of, I guess it would actually, let me go back, Ryan. I think it depends, right? It depends on if you're giving 5 spots and those 5 spots can be taken by the same player, right? Meaning that if it's a qualifier of some type of ranking, kind of like PGAU, hey, if I'm in the top spots of the PGAU, I get these starts, right? Yeah. If it's something like that, I think you're talking about, without a doubt, you're going to see more and more amateurs coming into the game and winning faster, right? However, I would also say the one reason why we're seeing it now is that they are playing up, right? They are playing in more significant events. I think a little bit earlier. I mean, there are guys. I mean, last year we had three kids, 16 years old, I believe, make a cut, whether it was on the Korn Ferry Tour or the PGA Tour. Sure. Somewhere. European, they had a 15-year-old who was in contention at one point in time over the summer. So I do think that would happen. I think it would depend on whether they're going to actually have more opportunities versus just one. I think that's a tough thing. I think the way it's been in the past where, hey, I win the US Am and I get into the Masters, I get into the US Open, I get into these significant events and never played in any of them before. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a pretty daunting task. Now these guys are Monday qualifying, they're getting sponsors exemptions, they're competing, on a regular basis against some of the best collegiate players that are from around the world, right? I mean, you got so many, players now coming in from, international into the collegiate game. They're playing against the best players, constantly.
It's also interesting. So Dunlap played 2 U.S. Opens, missed the cut at both.
Mm-hmm.
Not taking anything away from what he did at 29 under par, but that golf course, it certainly would be more conducive just because the freedom off the tee. We know Dunlap led the field in driving distance at the U.S. Open this past year, so obviously he hits it a mile. Certainly at Pete Dye, the stadium course in La Quinta, California, you can hit it just about anywhere and you're going to have a pretty good lie. So I do think courses probably matter. To your point, if you're getting thrust into a U.S. Open, the odds are dramatically lower.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, but still, you got to get the ball in the hole. These guys are still playing, against and on some of the toughest golf courses in the world. I mean, even at La Quinta, it's not an easy golf course. I mean, listen, you've got Q School there. I mean, used to be there anyway. So, I mean, it's not an easy golf course. I mean, maybe it is for those guys. Ryan, I think you and I might stumble a little bit out there.
With that, we welcome in the head coach of the Arizona Wildcats, Jim Anderson. Jim, thanks so much for joining us. The conversation is in relation to Nick Dunlap winning as an amateur on the PGA Tour. My question to Roger was, if every week on tour there was 5 to 10 spots for just college players, how often would a college player be able to contend on the PGA Tour? I'm curious what your thought is.
Well, I was hoping that was just a question for Roger, and I could hear Roger's answer. But
come on,
thank
Jim.
You, Ryan. Thank you, Roger, for inviting me to join you today. I think it's very obvious that the level of golf played at the collegiate level is at an all-time high, and I think that's a function a lot of the game's popularity, attracting different athletes at a younger age, where years and years ago it wasn't such a case. But if you zoom forward to present day, and Nick obviously just shattered a glass ceiling, so to speak. I know it's been done before. Contend, I'm glad you asked it that way, Ryan, because I think you would see players contending. We've seen that happen before, even in recent history. But I think there's a difference between contending and winning. And when you have someone win on PGA Tour as a collegiate or as such a young man that Nick was, that's a totally different question. I don't think we would have guys winning multiple times in 1 year at that level, like we just got to enjoy last week. So it's a great place for the game to be in with the level of competition, and you're seeing younger and younger players contending and now winning. And I think that just builds more momentum for people to do things that maybe haven't been done as regularly.
It's interesting, and I've seen that transformation of, there was a long time where players that would come off the Korn Ferry Tour, and there was almost like a year to 2 years of them learning how to fit in. And they never really were a part of the story. And that has completely been transformed, where now you every year see multiple Korn Ferry graduates winning on the PGA Tour. And, I think you see college golf at a completely different level than it's ever been before, as far as, and I mentioned the Ludwig Aberg coming right off of PGA Tour U and winning. You had the year where Hovland, Morikawa, and Wolff all won directly after the NCAAs were able to go and win on the PGA Tour. Obviously, Jordan won as a 19-year-old after turning pro. Now, these are all special guys. They're certainly not dime a dozen guys, but college golf, from my vantage, and I'm curious your thought, as you have to recruit it, it just seems like there is more talent than maybe ever before.
Yeah, I would agree with you wholeheartedly there, Ryan, and that's part of what makes this game so great and can be infuriating too. The best junior golfer doesn't always become the best college golfer. The best college golfer doesn't always become the best professional golfer. But when you look at some of those names mentioned and the success they had, in college and right ahead, I think it's fair to say that the players who progress at a level, and start beating their competition on a regular basis at not just a local or regional and state level, but even at a national, international level, it's definitely a recipe for success for future prediction on performance. So, I think what we're benefiting from as a group, be it college golf and just golfers in general, accessing information is so much different now than it was when I played golf as a junior golfer or college golfer. And I think, there used to be too, it's probably marrying two different thoughts, but there used to be a way that you should play golf, right? And that's kind of been dispelled too. You've got, one side of the arc says this is the best way to play, and I can find somebody on this side of the arc who says this is the best way to train, prepare, practice, play, strategy, all those things. And we're learning that there's a lot of different ways to get there. And that's what's so great about the game and why it attracts such a large audience of players, from young kids all the way to people who are, at the back nine of life.
Yeah. Jim, with saying that, as you start your journey of recruiting for these young players out there, I mean, that is a big part of this. I mean, at U of A, you guys have kids who are going to go on and play professional level. Probably 5 of 6 guys on your team are going to go and want to try to play professionally. You're recruiting young junior golfers right now. It's, to your point, it's at the peak of athleticism in some ways, right? I mean, how do you distinguish between that kid who just won a major junior event, a major international event, and maybe just a local event, but they're all very equally talented? Tell us a little bit about, like, how do you actually look at that?
Yeah, I think really good question, Roger. And we had an awesome team. We've been lucky to have great teams here for a few years in a row now. But one of the teams that Coach Chris Nallen and I coached, 2021 and backwards, we had a group of guys who just loved the game of golf, who couldn't get enough out, getting out onto the course, practicing together, competing together, playing together, and they had a terrific amount of pride in being a team and representing the school that they did, in this case, our school, obviously. So I don't know if I have a great answer to how do we determine that. And I back that up a little bit because when those guys graduated, I actually had our team here, the sports psychology group. I actually wanted to reverse engineer a little bit of, like, what's the DNA? Like, how did I accidentally get these great guys on our team? They went on and won a Pac-12 championship, and they're having success now. So I'm so proud of them, and just a small part of their golf journey, so to speak. But looking for the kids that have the right DNA for what's successful in our program is part of what that is. And it's true, the player who wins a U.S. Junior Amateur or a major national championship or regional championship, that's attractive, and that's part of their resume and their makeup. But finding the right guy is probably more important for us. And I'll be honest, I'll be the first one to raise my hand guilty. It's easier to like the guy who wins that big tournament and think that's the right guy. And so much of recruiting comes down to timing too. And when we can get that guy and his timing works and we get him, then we're like, great, awesome, let's go. Sometimes we don't get that guy when we need to. And the person who's persistent but continuing, and playing competitively and building their resume, that then the timing hits there, and all of a sudden we land on a gem that way too. So it's hard to say that there's a formula that works every single recruiting class, but building relationship and understanding the player and understanding what their motives and goals are, that's a big part of the recipe for deciding who we want to try to attract.
Coach, let me tell you a little bit about this podcast. It is the hub of junior golf. It is the fastest growing golf podcast out there, and certainly it's the main roadmap for junior golf families on how to play at the next level. So with that said, could you take us inside your lab on what age do you start to identify a player? And we understand that it could be 12, 13, 11 years old. Like, we know that it's a little crazy how young players get ranked and whatnot, but is there a time where you start to put a list together of, at least you want to watch them? We know you can't talk to them till after their sophomore year, but just a list of players that you've identified. Do you do that, or am I off base?
No, it's a great question, Ryan. And I don't know if my answer is so concise that it's like on January 1 is when we open up the Rolodex for what are we going to do. But, I'm lucky to have a great assistant coach with Coach Matt Walton, and he's very organized. He's really good at staying in front of a lot of things, but he's also, good at trailing behind, especially picking up, stuff as we move forward. And he's got a very keen eye on recruiting, as do I. And, I think for us, I will give the NCAA credit, and I know they're not necessarily the recipient of a lot of compliments all the time, but I do think that they did some things really, really, they made some great decisions on this recruiting timeline that's, not allowing communication between junior golfers before June 15th following that sophomore year. And what has gone away is the need to go trail a 7th or an 8th grader, watch them play, weeks and weeks in a row, and have their swing coach call, a college coach to try to start building a relationship with the 7th or 8th grader. I think, the fact that we now have a very definitive start day of June 15, that's helped a lot. Now, I do know, and I'm part of the competitive group, you want to try to put an evaluation together before that date, and evaluations can happen at any time. So, having an ability to get out and see some of the younger players preceding that class, if we're talking about the class of 2025, the current one right now, hopefully we would have had a chance to see some of them play before June 15. But, I would say that list is always being assembled based on a ranking list, based on performances and state tournaments, based on regional tournaments, and kind of having an earmark on who to be looking out for. But the go date of June 15th has really helped in terms of, kind of creating a fair starting point for the competition of recruiting.
Jim, that sounds very complicated, actually. But Jim, one of the things that we hear a lot on the podcast here from our audience is, when should I start? Like, again, you're kind of giving us when you guys can start really talking to them, and you lead up to, you have a list. But a parent or a junior out there that is in that freshman sophomore class, when should they reach out to Jim Anderson and say, hey, I'm interested in University of Arizona, I think it's the right fit for me? Is there something that you like to look for from the junior athlete before that?
Yeah, I think it's always helpful to know where interest lies, and I would challenge any junior golfer to cast a pretty broad net. I obviously, if you're ranked number 1 in your particular class, you're not going to need to try to get my attention or other coaches' attention, because we're going to try to find you. But so much happens between a 8th grade freshman and sophomore year of high school in the way of performance and rankings and all that stuff, and I don't want the message to be rankings are the most important thing, but that's also why casting a wide net, getting that information out, is helpful, and sending a somewhat regular update. I think it's pretty harmless to send a concise email. Make sure you state your grad year. Like a lot of the correspondence that comes in, if we don't have a grad year that's either listed in the subject line or somewhere early in the email, it's really difficult to determine if we can even respond or not. But outlining a grad year, outlining what tournaments you're scheduled to play in, obviously by sending an email, maybe expressing what kind of interest you have in that particular program. Those are all helpful cues to us. And then when our June 15th list rolls out, if there's 100 kids that we could write or email or what have you, knowing that you've corresponded with us probably elevates you to a place where now you're actually someone we're going to reach back to on that June 15th, which is really helpful, because I think I don't want to give away all of the secrets, but one of the things that I think works well is when you recruit kids that want to be a part of your program, as opposed to trying to convince kids to be part of your program. So if I already have that box checked and you've demonstrated that your interest is sincere, then that's very helpful in my opinion.
That's great. And I got a question. I'm going to tackle that one more time, which is, so we get a lot also of questions regarding grad year, post-grad year, reclassifying. Obviously, COVID threw a big wrench into everything for a lot of people, you guys as well. The transfer portal has done the same thing, right? I mean, so So one of just recently I had a question regarding reclassification versus gap year. You have any thoughts on or recommendations that you would say, hey, I don't really care as long as I know when you're coming in?
Yeah, I think my short answer on that, Roger, would probably be what is your ultimate goal? And if where you're at right now, and reclassification, there's dozens of reasons why that could be a really good idea, and there's just as many why it could be a bad idea, I think. But if you have clear goals on what you're trying to accomplish with your ambition in college, and I know being on this interview and this podcast, we're talking about college golf. The thing I think you need to be very realistic about before making that kind of decision is, do you think by reclassifying, are you going to be someone that none of the top 50 schools are being recruited, and all of a sudden you think you're going to be one that the top 10 schools are going to recruit you the next year? I mean, it's certainly possible, but I think you want to be realistic, and I don't like seeing young players wage their future on just their desire to be at that school, so to speak. I would hope before that decision's made, there's conversations with their support team, including parents, including the people they trust, be it coaches around them, and other family members or other players that they've played with that have experience in this category. And I think knowing what your academic ambition is a really important part of that too, because if you're a great student and you have goals to get a degree, you don't want to pick a school that's going to force you to concede some of your academic ambition as well. So I think it's unique, and I don't think it's a bad strategy for players. I would definitely be the first to raise my hand that says a 24-year-old senior is really good, especially if they've been in a program for a long time. So if they start at 19 instead of 18, okay, that's not a bad thing in some ways. But I also know that you've got your life to live, and you don't want to just stop and think it's going to be better by stalling out for 1 year.
Yeah. Point.
A message that I'm constantly getting, and it is the complete freak out parent on June 16th that they don't have an offer. Completely freaked out that June 15th happened. It was yesterday, and I don't have anyone. No one's given my son or daughter an offer yet. How realistic? I understand your point that there's a definitive day, but should parents also be realistic that doesn't mean you're not going to get an offer? It just means you're not going to get an offer that first day. How common is that?
Ryan, well, hang on, Jim. Ryan, are you talking about you?
Exactly, Ryan.
That's fair. Ryan, you call me on June 16th and we can talk about that. I think it's different for every coach. So I certainly don't want to project. I would assume that there's players from whatever class we're talking about that are clearly good enough that they're going to receive an offer on that day. But you're talking about 300 plus Division I schools and times 3 on Division 2, 3, and 4, and even more when you talk about junior college opportunities or NAI opportunities. So there's a lot of opportunities for a lot of kids in every single recruiting class. And I would say that the vast majority of coaches that are competitive like myself, we're not using June 15th to try to accelerate the recruiting process like that. It will happen. There will be players who do commit on that day or day after, and it's very, very accelerated. But I think another compliment to the NCAA, I don't know if it's a home run, but let's say it's at least a single. There's a day when you can start talking, June 15th, and emailing and texting and all those things. And then there's a day you can start visiting, August 1. So in my opinion, that time is used to exchange information, build relationship, which still is a part of this equation, in my opinion. And as those weeks, expire, that's when you start deciding, and you can start lining up your visits. And again, I think just because these dates are being thrown around, and your next recruiting class, for example, the 2026, when June 15th hits, there will be a large number of great players from June 2026 committing August and September of next year. But there's still another recruiting cycle coming, and that's true for even the class of 2025 right now. And I would even argue there's even another one after that. So the listeners who feel like their anticipation is building, and they're nervous about opportunities that may or may not exist, like keep your focus on the big picture, on the end game, on the goal of becoming the best golfer you can be. And that would even be a part of the recipe on how to decide a school, obviously. But being the best golfer you can be, if that's what your goal is, then all of the minutia of which coach is calling you and who's not calling you and what offers and what have, that stuff kind of just becomes noise in the background for you.
That was awesome, Jim. I say that all the time to our kids at the Golf Performance Center Academy, is just do your job. Everything else will take care of itself. Be proactive, do the things that you need to do to get yourself prepared for whatever may come your way. But it's on you to do the work, right? It's on the player. Obviously parents are there to support them, but it's on the player. Get your job done. Get your game as good as you can get it. Things will take care of itself. I think that's a great message for a lot of our audience to hear there. So thank you for saying that.
Yeah, of course. And I think that too goes to Roger, and I'm sure, you talk about it with young players you're working with, but, ask yourself why you're doing this regularly. It's okay, and it's because I love golf. It's because I love competing. It's because I enjoy being outside, all these reasons. If the reasons you're doing this is to try to create a scholarship opportunity, that's okay. I mean, but that's honestly, hopefully a byproduct of all the things that we've just talked about.
Yeah, no doubt about it. If you're, we tell parents all the time, if you're coming here to get a college scholarship, you got a better chance of getting academic money than you are going to get a college golf scholarship, right? Do the work on both ends of it, and that'll help out. So good message there.
I want to ask you, Coach, in the recruiting game for you, and certainly we're talking a very upper echelon school, golf school, academic school, Arizona. How much does geography play? And you talked about that great class you had and trying to go back and see what led to, the anatomy of that great class. And as I go and look at rosters, throughout the country of top 20, top 50, top 100 schools, there certainly does seem to be a geography bias at a lot of schools. Now, Stanford, no, they could be from anywhere, but, even the I'll just take the reigning national champs, Florida. Florida seems to always have a bit of a Florida bias. With you, I'm not saying you have an Arizona bias or a West Coast bias, but in the recruiting process, is that something you take into account, that someone is from this area and that might make it a better fit?
Well, I want to say in a very slivered answer, yes, I do. But the reality is, as a coach who recruits, we have to be able to adapt, and when we don't get the player we think we really, really want, there's another player somewhere else. And, I don't want to get too specific about Arizona, but it's a blessing and a curse when you have a lot of people who want to be at your program, because right. You get to have conversations across the globe, for example, and you really are looking for one or two different players. I think, I would say that we don't specifically target any geographic location, but there have been, places where, when you get a player or two players, other players from that area grow up and competing against them in junior golf, and now they're 2 years younger. They're like, oh, so-and-so's at Arizona. That can lend itself to those kind of pipelines, if you will. But I think our job is always to find the right players, and that's why we've seen it change over the years.
Sure.
We have a few international players now too, and at the end of the day, we're looking for the best players we can find with goals that match up with what we have for team and their individual goals. And when we can intersect on those two things, that's when we usually have a pretty good recipe for competition and success.
Yeah, Jim. With that being said, you got a new player coming in. What's it like in a day in a life? Playing for University of Arizona.
I think for us, again, going back to that finding young players who really love the game of golf, we actually provide our players with quite a bit of autonomy when it comes to their practice and their preparation. We hold them accountable. We structure a lot of our team practices. I'm guessing most of your listeners have heard on the 20 hours per week with practice, but a lot of the time we spend together in that 20-hour week is on the golf course, and it's competing and qualifying, because much like professional golf, you have to earn it to travel and play. So most of the time we spend together is on the golf course, and provided that we have guys who love golf, they have access to some great golf courses, including a home course with a facility. And if their goals are consistent through college of what they said in junior golf, and that's to play and win on a PGA Tour, for example, then we know that our guys are working on the right things, doing things that they need to. And of course, once in a while, they need a coach to kind of remind them to hey, are you doing your putting drills too? Or hey, are you let's do this. We'll set up team practices, of course. But when you first arrive, you're drinking from a fire hose. It's like life is crazy. And I think that's the coach's jobs to try to help kind of sweep away a few of the distractions that can make things feel very, very accelerated. And but overall we do our best to make sure that each of the guys on our team are provided with great weather, which I don't have any control over, but they generally get to benefit from.
Good job on that one.
Yeah. Get to play a great schedule, and compete with some great guys on some courses that welcome our teams out. So we feel like that's what we attract and what we work on trying to provide for our team. And I think any coach would say that when they have a competitive group of guys who enjoy being around one another, or ladies if it's women's golf, that's a really good recipe.
Last thing for me, Coach, you mentioned the 20 hours. Certainly coming from the junior golf world, there are no restrictions. Certainly there are a lot of junior golfers that are well over 20 hours because they're a 7-day-a-week practicer or player. Can a player at University of Arizona exceed the 20 hours if they're completely on their own?
Yeah, absolutely. And then that's a great question that sometimes is mythed when this conversation comes up, because the coaches can arrange for up to 20 hours of practice. That would include your weights, that would include time on the golf course, that would include practice. But most of the players that compete at the level that we're competing, I assume on other teams too, they're spending probably double that, the 20 hours that we require on their own. So there's absolutely a commitment made by young players, men's and women's, far exceeding that 20 hours. It's just that's what the limit is for the coach to arrange and structure.
Yeah, and I'm sure along with that is that, Jim, you're getting players for the most part. I would imagine that this is kind of a stop. They want to play professional golf, most likely, right? It's like they want to go somewhere where they can get a good education and develop to that next level. Obviously, you're providing an environment that's very conducive to that.
That's exactly right. And I do think coaches get a lot of credit when they're going good, and they of course take some blame when it's not going well. But the reality is, the players that want to do what Nick Dunlap did last week, they've been dreaming about doing that for a long time. And it's really obviously important to get yourself in an environment where that success is possible. But it doesn't mean that there's one way to do it. And I think that even kind of goes with what we talked about before. There's a lot of different ways, and this would even be part of maybe like putting a bow on a recruiting message. You have your dream, you have your dream to go to XYZ school, and they're not ready to take you, and it may never take you, but there's success stories all over the place when you find good people to be around, a good leadership and structure for you, and you bring your own work ethic and your own ambition and your own drive. Those are the recipes that are typically going to succeed for young players going through the college system.
Well, Coach, spring season is here. Certainly, best of luck to you, and thanks so much for joining us today on the Hub Junior Golf Podcast.
Gentlemen, it was my pleasure. Thank you, and keep doing a great job with the podcast. I'm a listener and a watcher too. So get some great nuggets from the other coaches you've interviewed, and really appreciate the invitation.
Awesome. Thanks,
so much,
Tim.
Coach.
Okay, good luck. Talk to you.
Okay, take care.
Well, great stuff. As always, Roger, certainly every coach has a different way, a different method. I don't remember who it was. It was in the last 3 or 4 podcasts. There was a coach that really hated the June 15th because he loved being able to get after the 7th and 8th graders.
Yeah.
You know, everyone has a different take on it, but certainly some wonderful advice there.
Yeah, great advice. I love where he goes down the road of like just making sure it's a good fit for the player. It's a good fit for the school. I mean, you know, understanding that and knowing what you're getting into is really important. I think that's misled. I think when he was talking about, you know, you have to pick the right school for you, right? I mean, at the end of the day, he didn't say those words, but I think that's his message is, you know, there's lots of opportunities out there. And if you know why you're looking for this, it really makes sense that, you know, explore as many options as you possibly can, because you're going to find the right fit for you versus I'm only holding out for this one school, but yet I don't really realistically have that opportunity. It just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense for a lot of players. So,
And we're going to point this out a lot, but certainly this is a direct message to every junior golf family out there. There is going to be a massive change in how recruiting is done. The Junior Golf Hub is coming out with their own new junior golf ranking system that is quickly going to be implemented at that of the ranking system that colleges use to pick the boys and girls that ultimately play at their school. So, you know, certainly coming your way in 2024, a massive change. As a parent, I can't tell you how quickly you probably need to make yourself aware of how the new system works. You'll instantly see how it is improved, and certainly as colleges, we start to hear from them about the new ranking system. But want to get our families an advantage on this, to get out in front of it, because there is going to be a massive change, as big a change as college recruiting in the game of golf has seen in the last decade. It's going to happen in the next few months. So just want to certainly our families, Roger, will have a little bit of advantage because they'll know ahead of time that it's coming.
absolutely. Well, just go on the juniorgolfhub.com, look out for the messages, the news coming. We're going to continue to promote it out. And also look for those tournaments out there. Get yourself playing in those events. It's going to be important that you play golf. As you heard from Jim Anderson there, they love to see kids coming into their school loving to play golf, not dreading the fact that they have to go compete or get into a qualifier or a tournament. Love to play golf because they're not, you know, punished from playing golf. They're learning new skills every time they play. So really important, and that's a little bit of a innuendo of what's happening.
Roger, I'm just I am so excited for the junior game that this new ranking system is coming, and it's gonna happen fast. It's gonna sweep the country. So certainly stay tuned. The juniorgolfhub.com. You're going to be seeing a lot of feelers of when exactly the system will be released. So very exciting for sure. This has been the Hub of Junior Golf Podcast. We'll see you next time. For Roger Nick, producer, director Michael Nick, I'm Ryan Burr saying we'll catch you next time on the Hub of Junior Golf Podcast.